The night sky above Delhi was thick with smoke and apprehension. It was late December 1299 AD, and something unprecedented was unfolding beyond the city's northern ramparts. Soldiers nervously peered into the darkness from the fortress walls, their hands trembling on their spears. What they beheld caused their blood to run cold. From horizon to horizon, shimmering like fallen constellations, thousands upon thousands of campfires dotted the landscape. The Mongols had arrived. A mother instinctively clutched her child as he pointed at the distant flames. His innocent voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Who is that, Mama?" She couldn't answer. Panic choked her, for everyone in Delhi knew precisely who they were. The Mongols. For 70 years, the mere word had been a curse, a prayer, and a death sentence simultaneously, as no army on earth had managed to halt their advance. From the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Vienna, from the frozen steppes of Russia to the deserts of Persia, the Mongol Empire had crushed everything in its path. Baghdad, the jewel of Islamic civilization, had burned for weeks. Libraries, repositories of centuries of knowledge, had been cast into the Tigris River, its waters turning black with ink. Historians estimate that 40 million people perished beneath the hooves of the Mongols. Entire nations simply ceased to be. The Khwarezmian Empire, once powerful and proud, was erased so thoroughly that today most people haven't even heard of it. In Europe, whispers of Mongol scouts sent kings fleeing and peasants scrambling for prayer. When the Mongols decimated the Hungarian army at the Battle of Mohi in 1241, it was hardly even a contest. 65,000 European knights and soldiers were slaughtered in a single day. The Mongols lost around 200 men, and now they were here, just 10 kilometers from the heart of Delhi, India's greatest city. For those tracking distances, 10 kilometers is approximately 6 miles. That's the distance between Midtown Manhattan and LaGuardia Airport, or the White House and Bethesda. It's nothing, merely a morning's horse ride. Inside the palace, Sultan Aladdin Khalji stood before a map, his jaw clenched so tightly his teeth ached. His generals encircled him, their faces pale. Through the windows, they could hear the city descending into chaos. Refugees from Punjab streamed through the gates, bringing tales of horror. Villages burned to ashes, men impaled on stakes, women and children taken as slaves. Markets lay deserted as merchants fled. The price of grain had tripled in a week. Temples and mosques overflowed with people praying for salvation. But here's the question I want you to consider as we delve into this story. Can Delhi survive where no other city has? Will the unstoppable force of the Mongol Empire finally meet an immovable object? Or will Delhi become just another name in the endless list of cities that fell before the Mongol hordes? I won't give you the answer just yet, because the true narrative, the human story of courage, tragedy, and brutal choices, is far more compelling than any simple victory or defeat. But before we get there, before we stand on that battlefield and witness what happens when two great armies clash, we need to understand who these people were and why this moment was so pivotal. So, allow me to take you back 70 years, to where it all began, to the man who forever changed the world and set in motion the events that would bring his armies to Delhi's gates. His name was Temujin, but history knows him as Genghis Khan. In 1206, he unified the Mongol tribes under his banner and began a conquest that would eclipse anything achieved by Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar. But here's what most people don't understand about Genghis Khan. He wasn't merely a brutal warlord who succeeded through senseless violence. He was a military genius who revolutionized warfare. His innovations are still studied in military academies today. The Mongol army wasn't just an army, it was a machine of terrifying efficiency and innovation. Every soldier was a cavalryman, capable of riding for days without rest. They could sleep in the saddle and shoot arrows backward at full gallop. They employed a decimal system of organization. Groups of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 men allowed for rapid communication and flexible tactics. They extensively used scouts and spies, gathering intelligence months before an attack. They used flags and torches for signaling over vast distances. Masters of psychological warfare, they sowed terror through mass killings, leading many cities to surrender without a fight. But their most devastating tactic, the one that annihilated army after army, was called the Feigned Retreat. Allow me to explain this, as it will be crucial to understanding what transpires later in the Battle of Kili. Imagine you are a medieval commander. Your army is arrayed in battle formation, shields locked, spears ready. The Mongols charge your position, a furious whirlwind of screaming horsemen. You brace for impact. But then the Mongols suddenly recoil, back away, and flee. Your men roar with triumph. You've won! Chase them down! Kill the cowards! So you do. Your soldiers break formation and pursue the fleeing Mongols. But this was precisely their intention, as they weren't truly retreating. They were luring you away from your defensive position, stretching your forces thin and disrupting your order. Then, once you're exhausted, scattered, and far from safety, the Mongol cavalry, previously concealed on the flanks, thunders in from both sides. Suddenly, you're no longer chasing vanquished foes. You're encircled. You're doomed. This tactic proved effective against Chinese dynasties, against the Islamic empires of Central Asia, and against Europeans in Poland and Hungary. It was simple, brutal, and nearly impenetrable, even when you knew it was coming. The chaos of battle, when a retreating enemy is sighted, incites every instinct to scream, "Pursue them!" By the time of Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his empire spanned from Korea to the Caspian Sea. Yet, his descendants harbored even grander ambitions. The Mongols subdued the Jin dynasty in China by 1234. They annihilated the Abbasid Caliphate and razed Baghdad in 1258. They invaded Europe, instilling dread in both monarchs and commoners. However, then something intriguing occurred. In the 1260s, the Mongol Empire fractured into 4 distinct uluses. Each was governed by a descendant of Genghis Khan, but they functioned independently. These included the Yuan dynasty in China and Mongolia, the Ilkhanate in Persia and the Middle East, the Golden Horde in Russia and Eastern Europe, and the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia. It's this final Chagatai Khanate that is relevant to our narrative. A glance at the map immediately reveals the challenge. The Chagatai Khanate was enclosed on 3 sides by other Mongol powers. To the west lay the Golden Horde, to the southwest the Ilkhanate, and to the east the Yuan dynasty. If the Chagatai Khan desired territorial expansion, he couldn't assault his Mongol relatives without sparking a civil war that would devastate all involved. Where could he expand? Only one direction remained, south, towards India. By the late 13th century, a man named Dua Khan ruled the Chagatai Khanate. Historical accounts portray him as ambitious, cunning, and glory-seeking. He eyed India and recognized an opportunity. The land was immensely wealthy, brimming with gold, spices, silk, and precious gems. Its various kingdoms and sultanates were fragmented, perpetually warring amongst themselves. Crucially, they had never faced the full might of a Mongol invasion. Of course, there had been border raids, skirmishes in Punjab, and probing attacks that were repelled. But a genuine invasion, a full-scale conquest attempt with total resource mobilization and the finest Mongol commanders, had never materialized. Dua Khan decided the time was ripe, but he wasn't leading this invasion personally. He was sending someone even more significant, his son, Kutluk Khwaja. They understood this wouldn't be a mere raid for plunder. It would be a comprehensive conquest, an endeavor for India's perpetual integration into the Mongol Empire. Standing in their path was a man equally ambitious, equally ruthless, and equally prepared to do anything to secure victory. His name was Alauddin Khalji, and he became the Sultan of Delhi in 1296 through one of the coldest acts of betrayal in Indian history. His uncle, Jalaluddin Khalji, was the preceding sultan. Alauddin was his nephew and a trusted commander. One day, Alauddin invited his uncle to a feast to celebrate a recent military triumph. Upon Jalaluddin's arrival, Alauddin ordered his assassination right at the banquet table. Alauddin then proceeded to Delhi, eliminated anyone who might oppose his rule, and declared himself sultan. Now, I know what you're thinking. This individual appears monstrous, and you're not wrong. Alauddin was cruel, paranoid, and utterly merciless in removing anyone he perceived as a threat. He prohibited alcohol throughout his domain, not for religious reasons, but because he believed intoxicated nobles were more prone to conspiring against him. He established an extensive spy network to gather intelligence on potential plotters. He controlled grain prices so rigidly that he could afford to maintain an enormous standing army. He was not a pleasant person, no matter how you might try to envision him. But here's the crucial point, and this is where history becomes more intricate. Alauddin Khalji was also a military genius and arguably the greatest defender India had ever seen. He comprehended the existential nature of the Mongol threat. If Delhi fell, if the Mongol Empire conquered India, it would signify the demise of everything he had built and the deaths of millions. Therefore, Alauddin undertook something revolutionary. He created India's first large-scale professional standing army. Before Sultan Alauddin Khalji, Indian rulers primarily relied on feudal levies. Instead of relying on feudal levies that might or might not answer a summons, the Sultan definitively rejected this traditional method. He began directly compensating his soldiers from the royal treasury. A cavalryman with a single horse received an average of 234 tankas annually, with an additional 78 tankas if he maintained 2 horses. This sum might seem modest until one considers that the Sultan funded 475,000 horsemen. Historian Farishta suggests that even if this figure is somewhat inflated, it still represents an astonishingly vast military force. He instituted the DAG system, which involved branding horses to prevent soldiers from merely renting them for inspections. He also established the Julia system, which mandated detailed written descriptions of each soldier to prevent fraudulent claims for wages by impostors. He made sure his forces were exceptionally equipped with the era's finest weaponry, including Damascus-forged blades, composite bows capable of piercing any armor, war elephants engineered to shatter cavalry charges, and catapults for sieges. He rigorously trained his generals and promoted them based on merit, not noble lineage. In essence, he refined the Delhi Sultanate's army into a formidable military engine, specifically designed to counter the Mongol threat. Alauddin Khalji would need every bit of this extensive preparation, as the Mongols had already begun to probe Delhi's defenses. In 1296 and 1297, Mongol contingents breached the frontier in Punjab. They were repelled, but only after considerable struggle, and it was clear that these were merely preliminary probes, tests of Delhi's response capabilities, gathering intelligence for an impending full-scale invasion. If you are enjoying this narrative, please hit the like button. It genuinely assists the algorithm more than you might realize, and signals to me that you desire more in-depth explorations of forgotten battles and historical what-ifs. Also, be sure to subscribe, as there will be many more compelling stories like this to come. Now, back to our tale. General Zafar Khan commanded the defenses of Delhi during these initial border skirmishes. It's at this point that our narrative gains significant intrigue, because Zafar Khan is one of history's overlooked heroes. His incredible bravery should have immortalized him, yet his name was erased from official records for reasons we will explore later. In 1297, Zafar Khan confronted a Mongol army of approximately 20,000 soldiers at a place called Jaran Manger. The Mongols were confident, having never suffered major defeats in this region. They expected to sweep through the Indian forces with the same ease they had demonstrated against all others. Instead, Zafar Khan utterly crushed them. 20,000 Mongol soldiers were either killed or captured. This represented a stunning defeat for an army that considered itself invincible. The following year, in 1298, the Mongols captured the fort of Sivistan in Sindh, believing they had secured a permanent foothold on Indian soil. Zafar Khan marched his army relentlessly, day and night, surrounded the fort, and not only annihilated the Mongol garrison, but captured their commander alive, bringing him back to Delhi in chains. These victories achieved 2 critical objectives. Firstly, they proved that the Mongols could be defeated. They weren't supernatural warriors, but flesh-and-blood individuals who bled and died like anyone else. Secondly, and very significantly, they absolutely enraged Doa Khan. The Chagatai ruler could not tolerate these setbacks. His pride wouldn't allow it. More importantly, he understood that if news spread across Central Asia that the Mongols had been routed by Indian forces, it would spark widespread resistance. The aura of Mongol invincibility, one of their most potent weapons, would be shattered. Therefore, Doa Khan made a firm decision. No more raids, no more limited campaigns. He intended to decisively put an end to Delhi once and for all. To lead this invasion, he selected his own son, Kutluk Khwaja, a prince of royal lineage, a commander proven in battle, and a man with much to prove. In late 1299, Kutluk Khwaja assembled his army somewhere in Central Asia. The precise size of this force is debated by historians. Some sources claim it comprised 200,000 cavalrymen, which frankly sounds exaggerated. More credible estimations suggest a strength of 50,000 to 60,000 highly skilled Mongol warriors. Yet, even 50,000 is a terrifying number when referring to Mongol cavalry. These were soldiers who had trained their entire lives for warfare, capable of covering 100 miles a day and firing arrows with lethal precision while at a full gallop. This army embarked on its lengthy journey southwards towards India. They traversed the Hindu Kush Mountains, that formidable range which had halted so many invaders throughout history. They passed through the Khyber Pass, that narrow corridor serving as a gateway between Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent. They swept through Punjab. Here's where the narrative truly escalates. Typically, invading Mongol forces would ransack every settlement in their path, torching buildings, raiding for provisions, and seizing slaves. However, Kutluk Khwaja strictly forbade such actions. He instructed his warriors to bypass cities, refrain from assaulting fortresses, and leave villages undisturbed. This progression spanned a full 6 months, during which they advanced through enemy territory without plundering a single item. Why did Kutluk Khwaja aim to keep his army fresh and primed for battle upon reaching Delhi? He sought to ensure his soldiers weren't encumbered by loot or fatigued by protracted sieges. This was intended to be the decisive confrontation, a single, monumental clash that would determine India's destiny. The Mongol army had an unambiguous objective: Delhi itself, the capital and the nucleus of Indian resistance, a city whose fall would open the entire subcontinent to Mongol conquest. News of the Mongol advance traveled faster than the army itself. Refugees streamed southward, bringing with them increasingly horrifying accounts with each retelling. Some claimed the Mongols numbered 1 million, that their horses breathed fire, and that they subsisted on the flesh of children. Panic engulfed northern India like a wildfire. In Multan and Samana, Alauddin's generals prepared their defenses, anticipating the Mongols' initial strike. Yet Kutluk Khwaja completely ignored these cities. He harbored no interest in secondary engagements. His route led directly to Delhi. When he finally arrived, when his army halted and encamped at Kili, merely 10 kilometers north of Delhi's fortifications, the entire city held its breath. This was the moment everyone had dreaded. The Mongol Empire, a force that had subjugated half the known world, stood at their gates. Indeed, chaos reigned. The streets were choked with Punjab refugees, families who had abandoned everything to flee south. Food supplies dwindled in the markets as the Mongols had cut off trade routes, causing prices to soar astronomically. Temples and mosques overflowed with people praying for deliverance. On the city walls, soldiers gazed at the distant Mongol camp, wondering if they would witness another sunrise. Within the palace, Sultan Alauddin Khalji faced the most critical decision of his life. His generals proposed sending an envoy to negotiate, offering tribute to buy time. Perhaps the Mongols would accept payment and depart. After all, other kingdoms had survived by appeasing the Mongols. But Alauddin's chief advisor, a man named Ala-ul-Mulk, was more blunt. If you fight them and lose, you will die. If you hide within the city and await their departure, you might survive. Choose survival. Alauddin listened to these arguments. Then he declared, "No, this is what I appreciate about this moment." Alauddin was no fool. He recognized the perils. He knew the Mongols had never lost a major campaign. He understood that engaging them in battle carried a very real risk of his demise. But he grasped something his advisors did not. If he showed weakness now, if he cowered behind Delhi's walls or paid tribute like a frightened vassal, every nobleman and governor from the Deccan to Bengal would interpret it as a sign of his vulnerability. Within a month, rebellions would erupt across his empire. Local rulers would assert their independence. His empire would fragment, and then the Mongols wouldn't even need to conquer Delhi, for it would self-destruct from within. Therefore, Alauddin made his choice. He would confront the Mongols in open combat. He would lead the full might of the Delhi army onto the field near Kili, and either triumph or perish in the attempt. But before setting out, he meticulously prepared. He appointed Ala-ul-Mulk to oversee Delhi's defense, entrusting him with the keys to the royal palace and treasury. "Whoever wins this battle," Alauddin instructed, "you will surrender the keys to them. If I fall out there, yield the city to Kutluk Khwaja. Do not let the people suffer a senseless siege." He also ordered the Badaun Gate on the city's eastern side to remain open. If the battle turned sour, if his army was annihilated, he wanted a clear escape route into the Doab region, where he might regroup. These were not the actions of a man confident of victory, but of one who understood he might be riding to his death. Yet, he intended to do it regardless, because sometimes, in history, the stakes are so immense that one must roll the dice, even when the odds are stacked against them. Meanwhile, Kutluk Khwaja encountered his own challenges. He sent a message to Delhi, an official challenge, demanding that Alauddin himself come forth and fight. When Zafar Khan, the general who had twice before defeated the Mongols, rode out to deliver Delhi's response, Kutluk Khwaja refused even to parley with him. "I have not come to fight with generals," the Mongol prince declared. "Kings fight kings." "If your sultan is too cowardly to come out and face me himself," the Mongol prince declared, "order him to display his royal standard on the battlefield, so I can be sure I'm fighting the true army of Delhi, not just cannon fodder." This was a brilliant psychological maneuver. By publicly challenging Alauddin's valor, Kutluk Khwaja made it impossible for the sultan to avoid combat. And by demanding Alauddin bring his personal standard, he ensured this confrontation would be an all-or-nothing affair. No tricks, no substitutions. Genuine armies, genuine commanders. One battle to decide everything. Zafar Khan returned to Delhi and relayed the message. In the council chambers, Alauddin's advisors once again urged caution. "This is a trap," they insisted. "The Mongols want you to fight them on open ground because that's where they are strongest. Use Delhi's walls, force them into a siege." But Alauddin had already made up his mind. The next morning, the army of Delhi would march to Kilhi. That night, the city fell silent, save for the sounds of prayers. Soldiers said farewell to their families, wives embraced their husbands, parents blessed their sons. Everyone understood that the coming day would be unlike any other in Delhi's history. Inside the palace, Alauddin, at 40 years old, donned his armor by candlelight. He was at the peak of his power, a man who had seized the throne through violence and maintained it through sheer willpower, suppressing rebellions, conquering kingdoms, and building an empire. Yet the greatest trial of his life awaited him. As the first light of dawn illuminated Delhi, the gates opened, and the army moved north towards Kilhi. The soldiers advanced almost silently, the only sounds being the clang of armor and the measured rhythm of drums. Delhi's citizens climbed to their rooftops to watch the army depart. Some prayed, others wept. All wondered if they would see their soldiers again. The battlefield at Kilhi was a relatively flat plain, but it possessed natural features that would influence the upcoming battle. The Yamuna River flowed on one side, while a dense forest bordered the other. This meant the battlefield had a limited width. The Mongols, who relied on wide-ranging cavalry maneuvers and flanking attacks, had less room to employ their preferred tactics. It was as good a location for a decisive battle as any. When the Delhi army arrived and began forming up, the Mongols were already waiting. Kutluk Khwaja had deployed his forces in the classic Mongol formation, cavalry units in perfect order, banners unfurled, horses absolutely still despite the thousands of riders. It must have been a terrifying sight. On the other side, Alauddin organized his army according to traditional Indian warfare principles, but with modifications learned from previous encounters with the Mongols. At the center, he positioned himself with the royal guard, his finest and most loyal soldiers. Ahead of the Sultan was Akat Khan with 10,000 heavy cavalry, whose mission was to absorb the initial Mongol attack and protect Aladdin at all costs. On the left flank, Aladdin placed Nusrat Khan with Ulugh Khan in reserve behind him. Zafar Khan commanded the right flank, a crucial assignment, leading a mixed contingent that included many Hindu warriors who had joined Delhi's service, seasoned fighters familiar with the terrain and absolutely devoted. Behind the forward cavalry, Aladdin arrayed his war elephants, massive beasts the Mongols had never encountered in significant numbers. The infantry and archers followed them. As the two armies stood facing each other on the plain, one must imagine the thoughts racing through the soldiers' minds. The Mongols had spent 6 months to reach this moment, traversing mountains and deserts, bypassing cities they could have plundered, all for this single battle. They believed, truly believed, that they were invincible, that their tactics were superior, and that their discipline and skill would bring victory as always. From Delhi's side, the soldiers knew they were fighting for their lives and the lives of everyone they loved. If they lost, Delhi would be burned, their families enslaved or killed, their civilization obliterated. This was not a battle for territory or treasure. It was a battle for survival. The morning sun climbed higher, and the air grew hot and still. The armies waited. Aladdin was in no hurry to begin the battle. His strategy was to buy time. Why? Because reinforcements were making their way to him from the eastern provinces. If he could hold out for a few days, more troops would arrive. Moreover, the Mongols lived off the land, and their supply lines were severely stretched after 6 months of campaigning. The longer this dragged on, the more likely they were to run out of food and be forced to retreat. However, Kutluk Khwaja understood this too. He needed to achieve a decisive battle quickly, so the Mongols began probing Delhi's defensive line with small attacks designed to provoke a response. It was at this critical juncture that events took an unfortunate turn for Aladdin. His well-conceived strategy was on the verge of being undermined by a single individual, a commander whose bravery bordered on recklessness. Zafar Khan, leading the right flank, watched as a Mongol contingent under Hijlak provocatively harassed his forces. The Mongols would advance, loose a volley of arrows, and then tactically retreat. This was a classic maneuver designed to break the Indian formation. Zafar Khan was intimately familiar with this tactic, having previously engaged the Mongols and understood their deceptions. However, witnessing his soldiers fall under the relentless barrage of arrows and the taunts of the Mongols ignited something within him. Zafar Khan made a decision that would alter everything. Without seeking Aladdin's approval or consulting his fellow commanders, he commanded an immediate charge. 5,000 horsemen under his leadership surged forward. These were primarily Hindu warriors shouting their battle cry, Har Har Mahadev. As they galloped towards Hijlak's Mongol detachment from the Delhi army's central position, Aladdin observed the unfolding scene, his blood running cold. "No!" he shrieked. "Zafar Khan, stop! Return to your position!" But it was too late. The distance was too vast. His shouts were drowned out by the thunder of hooves and the din of battle. Zafar Khan's cavalry crashed into the Mongol unit, and for a fleeting moment, their audacious plan seemed to be succeeding. The Mongols appeared to falter, beginning to withdraw. Zafar Khan's men exulted. "They're fleeing! They're afraid! Pursue them! Kill them all!" And so they did. They chased the retreating Mongols across the plains, 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, venturing further and further from the main Delhi army. This is when the trap sprang shut. The Mongol unit was not retreating. They were executing a flawless, feigned withdrawal. Hijlak's forces had lured Zafar Khan's cavalry away from their defensive positions, away from the support of the main army, into an exposed area where they were most vulnerable. Then, from both flanks, Mongol mounted detachments materialized and launched their assault. This was a quintessential Mongol strategy, and Zafar Khan had fallen for it, despite his presumed knowledge. Within minutes, 5,000 Delhi soldiers found themselves encircled by over 20,000 Mongol warriors. They were cut off, surrounded, trapped. From the primary battlefield, Aladdin watched in horror. He couldn't send reinforcements without exposing his center to attack. He couldn't abandon Zafar Khan without losing 5,000 of his most formidable warriors. He was paralyzed. Zafar Khan, grasping the immensity of his catastrophic error, chose the only path open to him. He resolved that his death would serve a purpose. "Form a circle," he ordered his men. "Back to back. We will perish here, but we will perish fighting." The Mongols tightened their cordon from all directions. Arrows rained down, and cavalry attacked in relentless waves. But Zafar Khan's warriors fought with the desperate courage of men who knew their fate was sealed. They cut down hundreds of Mongol soldiers, holding their formation even as their numbers dwindled. Zafar Khan himself, wielding his sword with both hands, struck down foe after foe. Mongol generals observed this display of valor with a touch of reluctant admiration. These were not soldiers abandoning the field. They were warriors who chose death over surrender. Kutluk Khwaja himself rode closer to witness the spectacle. He identified Zafar Khan, easily recognizable by his elaborate armor and the way other soldiers rallied around him. The Mongol prince made a decision. He commanded his men to cease their attack and rode forward under a white banner. "You are a brave man," Kutluk Khwaja called out to Zafar Khan. "You have lost, but you fought with honor. Surrender to me. I will make you a general in my army. When I conquer Delhi, I will make you sultan. You will rule in my name." This was a remarkably generous offer by the standards of the time. Zafar Khan could have survived. He could have attained power and wealth. All he needed to do was betray Aladdin. The general cast his gaze upon the Mongol prince. Then he looked at his remaining men, bloodied and exhausted, yet still standing firm. Then he smiled. "I serve Aladdin Khalji," Zafar Khan declared. "I live for him, or I die for him. There is nothing more to discuss." He raised his sword and charged. The Mongols resumed their onslaught. According to the historian Isami, who documented these events years later, Zafar Khan slew 5,000 Mongol soldiers before he finally fell. This specific figure is almost certainly an exaggeration. No single warrior could account for so many kills in one engagement. However, the very fact that the story suggests 5,000 speaks volumes about the ferocity with which Zafar Khan fought in those final moments. He did not simply die. He became a living legend, a man who chose honor above survival. But Zafar Khan accomplished one profoundly significant feat before his demise. In one of his last valiant attacks, he wounded Kutluk Khwaja. His sword or spear, the sources do not specify which, struck the Mongol prince in the shoulder. The wound he sustained was deep, bleeding profusely. Kutluk Khwaja's men pulled him from the fray and immediately began administering emergency aid. Though the prince survived, the injury was exceedingly grave. Ultimately, this single trauma, incurred during the hopeless final stand of a doomed fighter, determined the battle's outcome. Following the annihilation of Zafar Khan's contingent, the Mongols shifted their focus to Delhi's main forces. The true test was now upon them. The full might of the Mongol cavalry descended upon Aladdin's central positions. War elephants trumpeted, charging forward. Their tusks were tipped with blades, and archers on their backs loosed arrows into the Mongol lines. Horses shied in terror at the sight of these massive beasts. This was a spectacle the Mongols had encountered before, but never in such overwhelming numbers. Delhi's heavy cavalry, clad in armor, formed an impenetrable steel wall around their sultan. The engagement raged for hours, and Khathan, commanding the troops before Aladdin, fell holding his ground. Nusrat Khan and Ulu Khan, on the flanks, launched counterattacks with every Mongol attempt to breach their formation, preserving its integrity. Aladdin himself fought, his sword stained with blood. His presence inspired his warriors. The Mongols were experiencing something they rarely faced. They couldn't break this army. Delhi's soldiers neither fled nor succumbed to panic. They stubbornly held their positions with a fierce resolve born of desperation. As the sun set on this initial day of combat, both armies withdrew, exhausted. Thousands lay dead on both sides. The wounded covered the battlefield, pleading for water, for aid, for death to end their suffering. That night, in the Delhi camp, Aladdin's surviving generals approached him with urgent counsel. "Sultan, we must retreat. We have lost Zafar Khan. We have lost Akat Khan. We have lost thousands of our finest soldiers. Retreat to Delhi. Utilize the walls. Let them besiege us. It is our only chance." Aladdin listened. Then, quietly but with absolute conviction, he declared, "If I move, it will only be forward. Tomorrow, we fight again." In the Mongol camp, Kutluk Khwaja lay on a field cot. A fever had set in. His wound was inflamed. His generals surrounded him, arguing. The prince needed rest and treatment. They should withdraw the troops, regroup, and attack again when he recovered. But Kutluk Khwaja refused. "We will fight tomorrow," he insisted. "We are too close to victory to stop now." And so, both armies, battered and bleeding, braced for a long night. Soldiers tried to sleep, but the cries of the wounded offered no respite. Fires burned throughout both camps, and everyone knew that tomorrow would bring more death. But the second day of the battle unfolded differently. There were only minor skirmishes, reconnaissance probes, but no major engagement. Both sides seemed to be waiting for something. Aladdin awaited reinforcements from the east. Kutluk Khwaja waited for his fever to break and his strength to return. The third day was even quieter. It was eerily unsettling. Two immense armies lay less than a mile apart, observing but not engaging. In the Mongol camp, Kutluk Khwaja's condition worsened. The wound was infected, and poison spread through his blood. He was semi-conscious, drifting into feverish dreams. His generals convened an emergency council. The prince was dying. Without treatment from skilled physicians in a proper city, he would be gone within weeks. Moreover, their supplies were critically low. A 6-month campaign had depleted their resources. Local inhabitants had either hidden their food or fled with it. Delhi's reinforcements drew nearer with each passing day. For the first time in 70 years, a Mongol army considered retreat. On the night of the third day, under the cloak of darkness, the Mongol army began its withdrawal. They neither announced it nor sent messengers. They simply broke camp, mounted their horses, and journeyed north. Everything was executed so quietly and professionally that Delhi's scouts didn't even realize what was happening until dawn. When the sun rose on the fourth day, Delhi's soldiers looked across the battlefield to an empty expanse. The Mongols were gone. For a moment, confusion reigned. Then, someone began to shout, "They're gone! We won!" The cry of victory swept through the army like wildfire. Soldiers rejoiced, embracing and weeping with relief. They had survived. Delhi had survived. The indomitable Mongol Empire had been halted. However, when the news reached Aladdin, seated in his tent studying a map, he did not smile. He did not celebrate. He gazed north, towards the trail of dust clouds that marked the retreating Mongol army, and quietly stated, "They will return." He was both right and wrong. The Mongols indeed returned, but they never again came so perilously close to conquering Delhi. This account now delves into a tragic turn, which, to my way of thinking, vividly illustrates the complexities of historical narratives and how, at times, those who rescue nations are forgotten, while those issuing commands receive all the acclaim. Consider Zafar Khan, who charged into a Mongol ambush, fought savagely until his last breath, wounded the Mongol prince, and quite possibly, by doing so, saved Delhi. You likely assume he is revered as a national hero. You probably imagine statues erected in his honor, schoolchildren learning his name, and historians dedicating volumes to his final heroic act. However, you are mistaken. Upon Aladdin Khalji's return to Delhi, he was utterly enraged with Zafar Khan. Not thankful, but genuinely furious. The general had defied orders, launched an unauthorized attack, jeopardizing the entire battle plan and breaking formation. Indeed, his sacrifice proved pivotal. Yes, had Kutluk Khwaja not been injured by him, the Mongols might have truly triumphed. Yet, Aladdin Khalji viewed it differently. He saw a subordinate who had disobeyed directives, and in Aladdin Khalji's domain, insubordination, even heroic insubordination, could not be tolerated. If merely one general could disregard orders and be lauded for it, military discipline would crumble. Consequently, Aladdin Khalji made a decision that, personally, I find both militarily comprehensible and fundamentally tragic from a human perspective. He commanded that Zafar Khan's name be excised from official chronicles. The court historian, Amir Khusro, authored a chronicle titled Khazain-ul-Futuh, detailing all of Aladdin Khalji's military campaigns. It recounts the Battle of Kili, praises the Sultan's brilliance, and describes the Mongol withdrawal. But Zafar Khan receives no mention whatsoever, as if he never existed. Other chronicles, written during Aladdin Khalji's lifetime, either omit him entirely or relegate his role to a mere footnote. Only later historians, writing after Aladdin Khalji's demise, when it was safe to speak the truth, recorded what truly transpired. These historians, such as Barani, writing decades later, preserved the tale of Zafar Khan's heroism. But by then, the damage was done. Zafar Khan was forgotten by the very people whose lives he had saved. And it strikes me as profoundly unjust. This man gave everything. He perished defending his city. His reward was exclusion from history, because he made his sultan look bad. I am not suggesting that Aladdin Khalji was wrong from a purely pragmatic standpoint. Maintaining army discipline is paramount.
If generals can simply disregard commands whenever they please, you don't have an army, you have a mob. But, honestly, there should be room to acknowledge extraordinary bravery, even if it comes with disobedience. Zafar Khan deserved better. Meanwhile, Kublai Khwaja and his forces journeyed back to Central Asia. The prince's condition steadily worsened. The wound inflicted by Zafar Khan was slowly killing him. Medieval medicine simply lacked the means to treat such a deep, infected injury. No antibiotics, no proper surgical techniques. Only hope and prayer. And usually death. Kublai Khwaja died somewhere along the arduous journey home, likely in modern-day Afghanistan or Pakistan. His body was delivered to his father, Dua Khan, and when Dua Khan learned his son was dead, that the invasion had failed, that the Mongols had been forced to retreat from Delhi, he reportedly erupted in fury. But he also learned a lesson. India would not be easily conquered.
The Delhi Sultanate possessed strong leadership, a formidable army, and the will to fight. This would not be like the conquest of China or Persia, where one decisive victory could shatter resistance. This would be a protracted, brutal campaign with no guarantee of success. And yet, because Mongols were Mongols, they tried again. In 1303, a mere 4 years after the Battle of Kili, another Mongol army invaded. This time, they actually reached Delhi and besieged the city for 2 months. Aladdin Khalji sheltered inside with his court and his army. Provisions dwindled, diseases spread, and panic began to set in among the populace. But Aladdin Khalji held firm. He knew that the Mongols couldn't sustain the siege indefinitely. They had no supply base in India. They lived off the land, meaning they would run out of food before Delhi did. And that is precisely what happened. After 2 months, the Mongol army retreated, having accomplished nothing but wasted time and lives. Then, in 1305, Aladdin Khalji dispatched one of his generals, Malik Kafur, to confront yet another Mongol invasion, this time at a place called Amroha. This battle proved a decisive victory for Delhi. 8,000 Mongol soldiers were killed. The survivors fled back across the border. And in 1306, another Mongol force attempted to invade and was routed at the Ravi River by the Delhi armies. After this, the Mongols ceased their attempts. They still conducted occasional raids. Though minor skirmishes continued along the border regions, the era of large-scale invasions aimed at conquering India had definitively ended. Why this change? What factors led to such a transformation? I believe the answer is quite straightforward. The Mongols' empire was built on their reputation for invincibility. When they appeared at your gates, you typically had only 2 options: surrender immediately to potentially survive as a vassal state, or resist and face absolute annihilation.
In the vast majority of cases, capitulation without a fight was the preferred choice, as rampant rumors of their brutality ensured everyone knew the fate of cities that dared to defy them. However, Delhi not only withstood but repeatedly endured multiple sieges. Each Mongol defeat outside Delhi's walls inflicted cumulative damage on their formidable image. Word spread. If Delhi could overcome them, perhaps others could too. The perception of their invincibility crumbled. Stripped of this psychological weapon, the Mongols became merely another army, undoubtedly skilled and dangerous, but no longer unbeatable. I want to spend some time considering why the Mongols failed in India when they succeeded almost everywhere else. To me, the reasons behind their defeat offer significant insights into how to halt a seemingly unstoppable force. Firstly, leadership played a crucial role. Aladdin Khalji was an exceptionally capable commander.
He possessed a profound understanding of logistics, strategy, siege warfare, and recognized the vital importance of maintaining a professional army. He was no ordinary feudal lord relying on poorly trained peasant militias. Aladdin Khalji forged a formidable military machine specifically designed to counter the Mongols, and it proved effective. Secondly, military reforms were instrumental. Aladdin Khalji's innovations, such as the Dog and Hulia systems, might have seemed minor at first glance, but they produced monumental impacts. By preventing corruption and ensuring his soldiers were properly trained and equipped, he maintained the army's quality, making it capable of facing the Mongols head-on. Thirdly, strategic defense was key. Aladdin Khalji did not harbor ambitions of conquering Central Asia. He avoided overextending his forces. Instead, he focused on defense, establishing a robust network of fortifications along the northwestern frontier. He understood that he didn't need to destroy the Mongol Empire. It was sufficient to make the conquest of India so costly that it became undesirable. Fourthly, adaptation was critical. Delhi's armies learned from the Mongols. They adopted their cavalry tactics, studied their strategies, and developed countermeasures against feigned retreats and other characteristic maneuvers. However, I believe there was something more, something harder to quantify. The people of Delhi, from the Sultan to the common soldiers, understood that they were fighting for their very existence. When the Mongols invaded China or Persia, many inhabitants might have reasoned, perhaps the new rulers won't be worse than the old ones. Maybe we should just keep quiet and life will go on. But in Delhi, everyone grasped what a Mongol conquest signified: devastation, massacres, the end of their civilization. This understanding fueled a desperation and resolve in their fight that the Mongols rarely encountered elsewhere. And this changed everything. You can possess the best tactics in the world, but if your adversary is prepared to die rather than surrender, if they will stand their ground no matter what, then ultimately, superior courage can overcome superior skill. Now, I want to pose a question, and I genuinely encourage you to ponder it. Please share your thoughts in the comments, as I'm truly interested in your perspective. We remember the Mongol Empire as a colossal historical force, and rightly so, they transformed the world. Yet, we often remember conquerors more than those who stopped them. Why is this the case? Why do we know the name Genghis Khan but not Aladdin Khalji? Why can most Americans discuss Mongol invasions in Europe but have never heard of the Battle of Kili? Is it because we are more drawn to stories of victory and conquest than to tales of defense and survival? Or is there another reason? Let me know your insights in the comments. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on this, as it's something I frequently contemplate when studying history. The legacy of the Battle of Kili extended far beyond simply halting one invasion. Aladdin Khalji's victory provided him with the crucial breathing room needed to consolidate his empire. Subsequently, he conquered significant territories in South India, expanding the Delhi Sultanate to its maximum extent. He implemented economic reforms, curbed inflation, and established a period of relative stability that lasted for many years. None of this would have been possible had the Mongols triumphed at Kili. Delhi would have been decimated, the Sultanate would have crumbled, and the entire course of Indian history would have been irrevocably altered. Consider the ripple effect. If Mongol forces had seized India in 1299, they would have commanded a sprawling empire stretching from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean. India's vast resources would have fueled further Mongol advancements. Who knows? Perhaps they would have renewed their attempts to conquer Europe. Alternatively, they might have pushed southward into Southeast Asia. The geopolitical configuration of the entire medieval world would have been fundamentally different. Yet this scenario never materialized. A single battle, a solitary decision by the Sultan to engage in combat rather than seek refuge behind city walls. An impetuous charge by a general led to his demise, but also wounded the enemy prince. The refusal of one army to be disheartened and retreat altered history's trajectory. And I find this profoundly beautiful in its tragic essence. History isn't predetermined or fated. It arises from the choices made by ordinary individuals confronting extraordinary circumstances. People facing fear and uncertainty, yet acting according to what they believed was right. Alauddin was a ruthless despot, seizing power through assassination. Nevertheless, he also preserved millions of lives by refusing to capitulate to the Mongols. Zafar Khan disregarded orders and perished, but his sacrifice injured Kutlu Khwaja and likely saved Delhi. History is complex, mirroring the complexity of humanity, which makes it such a compelling subject to study. Before concluding, I wish to share another detail that, in my opinion, illuminates this entire narrative. Today, across Central Asia, in nations once part of the Mongol Empire, Genghis Khan is revered as a national hero, a founding father who unified tribes and forged the greatest empire in history. From their perspective, this viewpoint is valid. He was an exceptional leader. However, in the Middle East, in places such as Iraq and Iran, Genghis Khan is remembered as a destructive force, a monstrous figure who razed cities and massacred millions. And this perspective is likewise valid from their vantage point. In India, particularly in Delhi, scattered monuments and historical records still recall Alauddin Khalji as the man who shielded India from the Mongols. The same events elicit entirely different interpretations depending on the observer's perspective. There's a lesson here about context, about how our personal narratives shape our understanding of the world. So, what can we glean from the Battle of Kili in 2024, more than 700 years later? I believe several key lessons remain pertinent. Firstly, reputation is often an illusion. The Mongols had an aura of invincibility, and this reputation performed much of their work for them. But once someone finally rose up and offered effective resistance, that reputation crumbled. In your own life, do not let the perceived magnitude of a challenge deter you from even making an attempt. Secondly, preparation is paramount. Alauddin's success wasn't merely luck. He had spent years reforming his army, fortifying defenses, and training his soldiers. When the crisis arrived, he was ready. Thirdly, sometimes the correct choice is the most difficult one. Alauddin could have negotiated, paid tribute, and avoided battle. In the short term, this would have been simpler and safer, but in the long run, it would have been catastrophic. He made the challenging choice, and it paid dividends. And fourthly, heroes are not always remembered immediately. Zafar Khan saved Delhi and was purged from official records, but truth has an uncanny way of persisting. Decades later, historians chronicled his story. Centuries later, we are still discussing him. If you accomplish something courageous, something meaningful, even if you don't receive recognition at the time, even if those in power attempt to erase you, the truth will ultimately emerge. It might take years or even centuries, but it will surface. All right, we've covered a vast amount in this video, from the genesis of the Mongol Empire to the streets of Delhi in 1299, from the feigned retreat that ensnared Zafar Khan to the enigmatic withdrawal of the Mongol army, from the tragedy of a forgotten hero to a legacy that still resonates through history. If you've watched this far, firstly, thank you. I know it was extensive, but I truly wanted to do justice to this incredible story. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a battle most people have never heard of, yet one that altered history's course, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We have so many more such stories to uncover. Forgotten conflicts, unsung heroes, and pivotal moments that shaped the world we inhabit today. And seriously, leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about Alauddin Khalji. Was he a hero who saved India, or a tyrant who merely managed to repel an invasion? And what about Zafar Khan? Does his disobedience diminish or amplify the significance of his sacrifice? I want to hear your perspective. And here's what I want you to do next. Share this video. I mean it. This story deserves to be known. Zafar Khan deserves to be remembered. The Battle of Kili merits its place alongside Thermopylae and other battles where resolute defense reshaped history. Therefore, share this with a history-loving friend, post it on your social media, and contribute to disseminating the account of that pivotal day when Delhi successfully withstood and triumphed over the Mongol Empire. Failure to recount these narratives and recall these instances would unfortunately relegate them to oblivion, which would be a grievous loss. I appreciate you watching. I'll see you in the subsequent video. And always remember, history isn't merely about events gone by. It's fundamental to grasping our identity and our journey to this point. Every conflict, every choice, and every unsung hero has played a role in shaping the contemporary world we inhabit. Never let that slip from your mind.